big debate in 2012, and for a few years before that as well. You go out, you see a film, but you don't just go and see a film, you go and you stop and you think, now do I see it in 2D or do I see it in 3D? Now we have another option. Do we see it in 2D, do we see it in 3D, or do we see it in 3D HFR? Or do we see it in IMAX? HFR stands for high frame rate. And this month, December 2012, the first ever feature-length high frame rate film was released, The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey, from Peter Jackson, the creator of the Lord of the Rings motion picture trilogy, the writer and director of those three films, and he is now making a Hobbit trilogy. It was originally going to be a two-part film. It's now been split into a trilogy, and the first part is The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey. And I just wanted to weigh in on my thoughts on the high frame rate issue. Now, at a convention in the summer of 2012, this year, Peter Jackson screened around 10 minutes of footage of the new Hobbit film in the high frame rate format. Now, I'm not going to bother reading quotes and stuff because there are so many out there and you can find them for yourself, but it was not received well. There was a lot of complaints about it and people wondering whether it was an avenue worth investing in. Now, I have an interview here with Peter Jackson, so before we get into this, and I will be giving you my full in-depth analysis of the high frame rate version of the film as compared to the 2D version of the film, because I've seen both. The question is, why did you shoot the Hobbit trilogy using the high frame rate format? Peter Jackson says, we live in a rapidly advancing digital age. Technology is being continually developed that can enhance and enrich the cinema-going experience. High frame rate shooting for a mainstream feature film has only become viable in the last year or two, and yet we live in an age of increasing home entertainment. So I started shooting the Hobbit films in HFR because I wanted film audiences to experience just how remarkably immersive the theatrical cinema experience can be. Okay, and then he talks about the history of frame rates, how silent movies were shot between 16 and 18 frames per second with hand-cranked cameras. In 1927, when sound came along, the industry needed a more motor-driven, constant camera speed. 35mm film stock is very expensive, so it needs to be as slow as possible. However, the early optical soundtrack required a minimum speed to achieve fidelity of the sound. This sounds a bit like gobbledygook, to most people, I guess, and I don't fully understand it myself. I'm sure if I sat there and really concentrated on it, I would, but I have a national diploma in film and TV production, but I'm still not completely, I wouldn't call myself a huge kind of technical buff who knows all this stuff. But however, the early optical soundtrack required a minimum speed to achieve, I just said that, 24 frames was decided on as the industry standard, and it has been for over 80 years, with cinemas around the world installing mechanical projectors only capable of projecting at 24 frames per second. It was a commercial decision, the cheapest speed to provide basic quality, but it produces movement artifacts like strobing, flicker, motion blur. Now in the digital age, and this is still Peter Jackson talking, by the way, there's no reason whatsoever to stick to 24 frames per second. We didn't get it perfect in 1927. Science tells us that the human eye stops seeing individual pictures at about 55 frames per second. Therefore, shooting at 48 frames per second gives you much more of an illusion of real life. The reduced motion blur on each frame increases sharpness and gives the movie the look of having been shot in 65mm or IMAX. One of the biggest advantages is the fact that your eye is seeing twice the number of images each second, giving the movie a more wonderful, immersive quality. It makes the 3D experience much more gentle and hugely reduces the eye strain. Much of what makes 3D viewing uncomfortable for some people is the fact that each eye is processing a lot of strobing, blur, and flicker, but this all disappears in HFR 3D. And then finally, to round it up, having shot the film using HFR technology, what are your thoughts on the experience? Peter Jackson replies, I think HFR is terrific. As a filmmaker, I try to make my movies immersive. I want to draw the audience out of their seats and pull them into the adventure. That is the experience I hope to offer moviegoers, no matter which format they choose at the theatre. While I personally prefer watching The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey in HFR 3D, I can assure you that every format will provide you with an incredible and immersive experience. HFR 3D is different. It won't feel like the movies you're used to seeing. In much the same way as the first CDs didn't sound like vinyl records. We live in an age when cinemas are competing with iPads and home entertainment systems. I think it's critical that filmmakers employ current technology to increase the immersive, spectacular experience that cinema should provide. It's an exciting time to be going to the movies. And I need a drink. Always when I'm reading something, I feel more out of breath than normal. By the way, innocent apple juice is godlike. So, if you're taking all that in, you know, it doesn't work for me. It really doesn't work. I went to see The Hobbit in 2D, and I will be doing a review of the film itself with my fiance at some point, as part of the At the Movies series. But I really don't think so. The film was great. I absolutely loved the film. Thought it was fantastic. It was a bit like a dream, you know, because it's the best prequel that's ever been made, you know, and never has there been such a big film series like Lord of the Rings. And then 10 years later, you know, the original filmmaker has gone back and, you know, made a film that was before those original films, or film, that was exactly the same tone, the same feel, and slotted in perfectly with the films that come before it, even though that they're, you know, in front of them in the timeline kind of thing. We had the Star Wars films, but they didn't quite match up. This one matches up perfectly, and I thought it was a fantastic film. Absolutely loved it. Now, 2D, brilliant, looked amazing. You know, the CGI at times, I thought, not as good as you would expect. You know, Gollum looked fantastic, who of course appears in the film, in the Riddles in the Dark segment. Some of the CGI, I thought, could have done a better job on that one, but most of it was very, very good. And then a week later, a few days ago, I went to see the high frame rate 3D version. Now, I want to talk about 3D, but I don't want this video to be super long. But I'm not a fan of 3D. Only maybe once or twice have I seen a film and thought, yeah, that 3D is pretty cool. I've never thought that the film needed 3D, ever. I think it's a stupid gimmick that's come along, and Avatar made it really successful. Avatar made it kind of... I think it made studio heads think, right, that became the biggest film of all time because of 3D, premium pricing. It's the truth. I mean, what studio head wouldn't think that? It's just business. It's called the movie business because it is a business. To make movies, you need money. And to make money, you need movies in the movie business. So, of course, 3D was getting just thrown at everything now. Even films that weren't filmed in 3D, they're like, right, just do a post-conversion, slap that on there, get the film out in 2 different versions, you know? I mean, back in the day, film was released, now it's 2D, 3D, 3D IMAX, you know? And now we're having like 3D high frame rate and 3D IMAX, and yeah, it's a lot to keep track of, and you know, The Hobbit should be doing very well because there's so many different ways to see it. You know, in one instance where it could be one showing, and say, you know, 100 people paying to see it, there could be 3 showings running concurrently, the 2D, the 3D, the 3D high frame rate, and you have 300 people, 200 of which are paying premium pricing. Now, I watched a very interesting interview with Peter Jackson. I'll leave a link to it in the description box of this video. It's like a 42-minute video, and it's the full unedited video of his interview with the Los Angeles Times about The Hobbit, and they briefly talk about the high frame rate aspect of the film. Actually quite in depth, to be honest. And Peter Jackson kind of almost won me over, even though I'd seen it and didn't like it. And at the end, he said that he was adamant that the high frame rate version of the film would not be a premium price option, and that it was going to be the same price level as the normal showings. And the guy who was interviewing goes, well, hang on a minute. I mean, are the theaters going to agree with that? You know, are they going to agree with that? Having to buy the equipment to project these 48 frames per second films and then not charge premium pricing? And Peter Jackson it was a bit of an awkward moment then. He's like, no, well, you know, we talked about it. You know, I was adamant that it was going to be like that, and it was premium pricing because I paid like about £2 more, I think, maybe £3 more. It was around the same price as 3D, but you know, still. Anyway, this video's been 10 minutes now, so I'm going to just go right into my analysis of the actual film and how it matches up from high frame rate to 2D. Film opens we get this wonderful prologue sequence kind of where Bilbo, played by Ian Holm, the old Bilbo, is looking back on the start of his adventure, and he recalls the tale of Erebor, the downfall of Erebor, the dwarf mountain, and the arrival of Smaug the dragon. Brilliant sequence, absolutely loved it. And even before that, actually, there's a scene where Bilbo is walking down a hall in Bag End and he opens a chest. Immediately, 3D glasses on, high frame rate and full glory. It looked very strange. It looked like he was walking in fast motion. It looked like everything he was doing was sped up. Now, I've heard that it takes some time to get used to it, and I'm not sure whether I did just get used to it because I didn't see much more of that, or whether it's in certain parts, and depends on the lighting. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I just popped into the middle of the film, high frame rate, it would start looking like that for about 10 minutes until my eyes adjusted to it. I mean, everyone's eyes are different, so that's the thing, you can't really gauge exactly. I mean, I can't say that you will see it, and you will see it exactly the way I saw it, but the way I saw it, it looked a bit sped up. And in a film where slow motion is utilised a lot, it'll go into slow motion, and it'll come back to normal motion, and it'll seem like things are slightly faster than they should be. Yet, the movements, the sound coming out of the actors' mouths is exactly the same, so it's a very weird kind of thing to look at. Now, Peter Jackson talks about it being immersive, and, it makes you feel like you're more of a part of it and stuff like that, and immersive is a word he keeps using, and, drawing them out of their seat and stuff. I want to stay in my seat, I think you can get drawn into a film that's 2D. I mean, again, there's that whole issue, people, it's called 3D. It's not really 3D because a 2D film is 3D. What you're seeing is a visual representation of, a 3D, a three-dimensional real world. It's, films are, apart from, animated films, but films that are shot in real life, you're seeing that 3D representation, and you see, and your eyes register everything that's going on. It doesn't look like people are like completely flattened. You see it, you can get it. The 3D thing is just basically adding another kind of layer there, that the glasses pop out, and it kind of just gives it a bit more depth and stuff. And of course you can play around and have things flying towards you and stuff, but otherwise, it doesn't work for me. It doesn't drag me out. It kind of takes me out of it. I don't even know what I just said then. Okay, I'll start again on that one. I won't edit it out either, but it doesn't draw me in. It pulls me out of it because I'm kind of like, fidgeting the glasses. Oh, it's hurting my nose a bit and stuff, and it's a bit blurry there. If I move to the right, does it look a bit more? It's always slightly blurry for me, but I will say the high frame rate 3D is probably the best 3D I've ever seen, and it definitely does enhance the 3D-ness without question. And that looked very good, and there was a nice depth to it and stuff. Definitely not needed though. Definitely didn't make me think, oh, I'm glad I watched it in this version because the 3D looks great. No, didn't think that at all, to be honest. And I guess it feels a bit crisper. Here's something really random. In the 2D version of the film, the credits come up, a Wingnut Films production. The text looked slightly pixelated, ever so slightly. 3D version, high frame rate, it looked beautiful. It pops out the screen and stuff. So there's one point to it, I guess. Now the prologue. Immediately you see these people walking around this village and stuff in Erebor, or not Erebor, there's like a town there anyway, Dale I think. Immediately it looks weird. Okay, you got people walking around in costume, and there's been loads of comparisons online of people saying, oh, it looks like Sunday Night Football, or it looks like high definition TV. It does. It looks like it was shot on video. And it feels like you're there in not a good way for a film like The Hobbit. It feels like a really expensive fan film, to be honest. It looks like it's shot on video. The quality is fantastic, but it just it shines too much of a light on it, I think. I think if you had a real good close-up, you could probably see like the seams on their makeup and stuff. And I've read stuff like that before, but I didn't really see that. But it almost feels like, anyone in the UK might be able to get this, but like, it feels to me like a kids show, You know, like where it's like a fun, wacky show, and they're like, "Did you know this about history?" And then they'll cut to like a little kind of thing they put up there, like a little set with like someone dressed as a historical figure and all that kind of thing, and he's like, "Oh, I'm Charles the First" or whatever. And you know, it's not done great, but it's, you know, it gives kids a good idea and it's a bit fun and stuff. It looked very much like that, you know, shot on video, and that really took me out of it because I thought it just looks a bit like a documentary of the making of the film. You know, now there are scenes where this does not in any way. This isn't like how the whole film is. You get to scenes where you see the big gates of the mountain. Looks fantastic, looks brilliant. In fact, I took my little brother to see it, and he went, "Wow!" It looked brilliant. And then you see the dwarves, and now they're inside the mountain, and there's a lot of CGI stuff where, like, you know, there's this big hole inside the mountain, and that's all like a, you know, CGI environment. And because of that, it doesn't really look that that real. Then it looks more surreal, which is the way I think the film should look. And the special effects, it's half and half. Sometimes it makes it look great, sometimes it makes it look terrible. There's a scene where all the dwarves are in Bag End, and they've just eaten all of Bilbo's food, and then a few of them are throwing the plates around Bag End, catching them, putting them in a pile and stuff, and it's really fast, like shoo, shoo, shoo. And the plates looked so fake in the high frame rate version. It was ridiculous. The 2D version, you know, you could tell it was CGI, that they didn't do it for real, but it really stood out in the high frame rate version. It was like, it just looked really fake. So I'd say in the 2D version you could tell, you know, oh, that CGI wasn't too good on that shot. The rest of it was great. High frame rate, a lot of it stood out a lot more as being not, for me anyway, the way I saw it. And in that interview with Peter Jackson, he said that the high frame rate greatly enhances the CGI, and I don't agree with that. I don't think. Yeah, not so much. And there's another just short shot that looked really documentary like, you know, all cheaply made like, and that's when Thor and Oakenshield, after the events of Smaug overtaking, you know, Dale and Erebor, he's kind of like working alone, and he's making a sword, you know, and he's hammering on this, you know, burning hot blade, and it just looked really like, well, it almost looked like one of those things from Deadliest Warrior, you know, where they mock up someone, and it looked a bit like that. Yeah, and that's the thing. The film like The Hobbit, it's high fantasy, and you want to be taken away to this world and transported into Middle Earth, and I really think that 24 frames per second greatly enhances that feel. I mean, look at the Lord of the Rings films, how much color grading went into that. There's even a whole section on the DVDs and the Blu-rays about the color grading and how they change it to make it look more appropriate to the, you know, like the scenes in Lothlorien have got like a real blue tint to them and stuff, very surreal. But when you take something and make it look really real, as if you're there in Middle Earth, it doesn't work for me. It really didn't work for me. I just felt like, I don't know. And there's another scene where all the dwarves are leaving Erebor, and there's a big panning shot of Thorin on a mountain, and you really could tell that he was wearing a wig. It just looked like a scene from one of the documentaries, one of the great documentaries on the Lord of the Rings DVDs. So some of the scenes just looked too real for me, too much like they were shot on really high definition video. Other scenes were great though, you know, like all the stuff in Moria was fantastic, and Gollum, brilliant, absolutely perfect. You know, the stuff with the orcs. Although I will say that Azog, the pale orc, I didn't even think about the fact that he's a completely CGI character. When I watched it the first time, I was speaking to someone, a YouTuber, and he said, "Oh, I didn't like that it was all CG," and I thought, was it? Oh, I guess it was, really. It can't have been a guy that big, but it was really well done, especially him, Azog. And when I saw it the first time round, high frame rate version, you kind of tell a little bit more, I think. Or then I don't know, because I wasn't even thinking about it the first time round, so I probably can't pass a fair judgment on that. The ending scene was great and everything, and a lot of things look very good. I will say that the whole thing, like when the camera turns, there's a bit of motion blur. You can't see things too clearly. I can definitely see what Peter Jackson means with the motion blur being reduced, but it's really not reduced to the point where it's like, wow, you know. And it was almost as if it was too much. I don't know. I'm not a fan, basically. I wonder if they'll release the 48 frames per second version on the Blu-ray. What they're going to do with that when it comes out on video, on video, when it's released. I don't know what they're going to do with that. I don't know. Are they going to go with the high frame rate version of The Desolation of Smaug and There and Back Again, the next two films? I've got to assume that they are, because they filmed it that way. And he said that 48 frames per second equals double the rendering time in 3D, triple the rendering time. So it's definitely a lot of effort has gone into it. So I got to think that they will release the next two films in 48 frames per second, regardless of how well that particular format does for the film. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the high frame rate. It just looks too real to me in a film that should look unreal. And again, it's just slow motion, then back, and only a few times after the beginning did I see things that looked slightly sped up, and that might have been me just like not focusing on something for a second and then just looking up again and getting taken out of it again. I'm not sure. The reason I went to see the high frame rate version, honestly, is because I loved the film so much when I saw it the first time round, and I thought I'll give it a shot. I gave it a shot, and luckily the film's so good that it didn't really bother me. I didn't feel like it was a wasted viewing. I really did enjoy it, and the 3D was interesting, but it's not for me. But I'd still be interested in seeing the high frame rate version of the next film. I'll give it another chance. If I'll watch it first in 2D and see what I think of it then. But overall, it was not as bad as I thought. A lot of it looked great, but overall, it took me out of it more and made me think about the fact that it was a film more than it should have. And a quote I read that's kind of worrying is where Peter Jackson said that regarding test audiences, that most of the people under 20 had no issue with the high frame rate and loved it, and these are the people who are watching films on iPads these days. I don't know about you, but I can't watch films on tablets and stuff. I mean, when I had a portable DVD player years ago, and I thought, oh great, I'll be able to watch films on the coach when I go traveling, because I used to travel a lot back then. And I'd always try, and after about 10 minutes I'd just stop. I can't watch films on the move really without I don't enjoy them that much, or even on the tablet like that. I just like it on the TV or in the cinema, and I don't like that idea that he's catering to a new generation, and that it's kind of like, let's move things into the 21st century, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I mean, go to IMAX, film the film in IMAX, take a page out of Christopher Nolan's book. I mean, if they'd filmed The Hobbit entirely in IMAX, I don't know how expensive that would even be. I don't know how expensive it was for them to film in 48 frames per second in 3D and 24 frames per second, but IMAX, The Hobbit in IMAX would have been fantastic. Prime example, go see the Dark Knight Blu-ray or the Dark Knight Rises Blu-ray. Look at the IMAX scenes and tell me that does not look fantastic. Tell me it doesn't, because it just does. IMAX is the way to go. It's just a higher quality film stock, so I believe anyway. Don't quote me on that. Again, I don't know everything, but I'm just going off what I feel I know. And IMAX really enhances the quality for me anyway. And I don't think high frame rate it does enhance the quality, of course, because it's double the frames, but it looks too real for me. And I was trying to think of maybe like a way to endorse it and say, well, it would be great if it was used in this type of film, but I really can't think of what, unless you're talking a found footage film to make that look even more real than it normally is. But is it going to be worth it? I can't see him coming out with a super duper 48 frames per second version of Paranormal Activity 7. I really can't think of any film that would benefit from it, to be honest. And he's talking about 24 frames per second being not great quality, Just go to IMAX. Peter Jackson, just go to IMAX. So those are my in-depth thoughts on the whole high frame rate version of The Hobbit. Any questions? Don't hesitate to ask. Any part of the film, I'll try to remember how it looked. Anything like that, just let me know. But yeah, that's been me waffling on, or as one of my favourite YouTubers likes to say, burbling on about The Hobbit, An Unexpected Journey, the high frame rate version versus the 2D version. I would say go for the 2D. But I always feel like, again, that it's like I'm gonna go see the 2D version, and I feel like, oh, I'm not seeing like the best version, even though I know that it's not the best version. It tricks my brain, you know, and it probably tricks other people's brains to the point of actually doing it, where they're like, well, the 3D must be so much better, you know, the high frame rate must be even better, you know. Let's go see that. Let's look and see the 2D. I forget about the 2D. Oof. Nah, 2D is the way to go. Or at least watch it in 2D first to see if you like the film, because you might sit down for the high frame rate version, and the high frame rate might put you off, and then you won't give the film a chance, and that would be an even bigger travesty, I guess. I was going to say tragedy then, but let's not go too far. Which is, again, Peter Jackson's saying he wants to bring in, you know, I guess, well, the new generation, I guess, wouldn't really bother them because they don't know any better. But you know, people might go see the high frame rate version and think it's going to look amazing, and think, well, this looks a bit weird, I'm not watching this. Maybe that might happen. I don't know. There's a risk. Probably not. I don't know. But yeah, go see the 2D version first, at least. I think that's the way to go. I'm assuming the IMAX version of the film has been done in post, because they didn't shoot it in IMAX. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. Please check in with your thoughts down below. Subscribe if you haven't, and yeah, hope you all have a very good Christmas. It is currently Christmas Day right now, early hours in the morning. So thank you for watching. See you next time.
Yeah, he's really cool. But he's not quite as cool as you, 'cause